Welcome at the Thursday morning science webinar of today, April 15. Today we welcome Eva Ratti as a speaker for our webinar. Welcome, Eva.
Thanks.
So we are going to reflect today about the meaning of having a PhD in the job market. So before letting Eva start her talk, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to her professional experience. So she graduated at the University of Milano Bicocca, and she then obtained a PhD in astrophysics at the University of Amsterdam in 2013. She is also co-founder of Find Your Doctor, that is an employment agency in Italy specialized in the placement and valorization of researchers outside academia. So the idea of this initiative is to favor an easier access of researchers for companies of any size. She's involved in the strategic development of the startup, and she also works as an innovation manager to assess clients' requirements and recruit the necessary expertise. On top of this, she's also training PhDs in workshops and seminars about the professional perspectives, and she's involved in research activities on the skills that they can develop during their path in the academia. So the title of her talk today is Tales of a Twisted Road. So I thank Eva very much for accepting our invitation, and then I let her start with her presentation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Denise, and thanks to all the organizers for inviting me and having me here. As was anticipated, my job is to worry about what happens when you finish your PhD and you don't know where to go, what to do with your career. And maybe you have to jump towards a job market that you don't really know much about and where you don't know how to spend your skills. So I could talk a lot about this topic from different perspectives. I think I could tell you many interesting things. Usually I give courses that take 16 hours in order to discuss the issues and give tips about this transition. But instead today, I will start from my story. And the reason of that is because Marco Ponsetti, the organizer, invited me to testify for a professional course that is not what you usually hear about. During the PhD, sometimes we hear testimonies about PhDs who had a successful career. We hear a lot of success stories, but we more rarely hear about strange stories, not so successful stories, failure stories. And I like to be an example of how an experience that could be seen as a failure can actually lead to a happy ending, a happy life situation. I like to testify for this because usually when I do so, a lot of people write to me because they empathize, they realize they're feeling lost as I felt, and sometimes they can find some reassurance in a strange and twisted story like mine, but also because I think my story is an extreme case of what the majority of PhDs, as we will see, will have to somehow face: a redefinition of yourself, a reassessment of your values and of your objectives in life, which are issues that are entangled with a transition such as the one that goes from the world of academia, the being a researcher in the academic context, to being an innovator, maybe still a researcher, but in a very different environment, such as the one that you will find in a company or in an organization or anywhere in the in society outside the academic bubble. So I know usually the meetings like this one, this group is devoted to discuss science. Today we will not discuss science as a study matter, but as a life choice in the particular situation where it goes somehow sideways. I hope you will find this interesting and helpful. I will try to combine my story, with some tips that come from my job and my experience, so that I can maybe be helpful for those of you who will face the career transition soon enough, but also some suggestion about how to live your PhD in a more fruitful way if you are still in the middle of the path. First of all, I'm an astrophysicist, as mentioned. I got my master in Milan, then my PhD in the Netherlands from the University of Amsterdam, but I used to study in Utrecht. Actually, it was troubling for me even to choose to do a PhD, because I dreamt to be an astronomer since I was a child. But after I graduated in physics and then astrophysics, I was not sure that I really liked it so much. So I started having doubts very soon, but in the end I decided that if I wanted to know what being a scientist meant, if it was correspondent to my naive idea when I was a child, I had to try it. I had to do a PhD and see what being a researcher truly meant. I'm not going to tell you what I was studying, but for those who know a little bit, I worked both in the optical band and in the X-ray, because I used to study accreting binary systems. A very specific niche of astrophysics, very much not applicable, not applied, and not useful for practical reasons other than the technology that is developed in order to see so far away and so extremely on the wavelength band in the sky. So nothing that I could ever directly use on the market. So I left after my master, went to the Netherlands. The PhD there is 4 years. I lived in a couple of roads with extremely unpronounceable names, such as this one. And season after season, I experienced life in the Netherlands. For the first 2 years, I was extremely happy. Everything in my PhD was new. I was learning. I like learning, and I'm in my comfort zone when I'm learning. Then on the 3rd year, I was starting to be expected to deliver results, which I did, but it was not that fun anymore. So I started to wonder if I truly wanted to be a researcher or not. I wasn't really sure anymore. And I started to miss Italy, to miss home. By the 4th year, I was crying every time I saw the Alps from the plane. So I started to realize that maybe I was not the kind of person who can make a life in a different country without shedding a tear. And probably it was not the direction for me. Even so, this PhD gave me a lot of wonderful opportunities and experiences. And I hope the reason why I mentioned these are pictures which I took of different observatories around the world, where I had to travel to in order to collect the data that I used to study for the rest of the year. So you have, as an astronomer, you have in the optical band at least, you have a few days where you go to places like these ones and collect your data by working at night, exactly as in the idea of what an astronomer does. And then for the rest of the year, you are at your PC, analyzing your data, struggling with debugging of software and the kind of life more similar to any other scientist when they're not in the lab, basically. This is our lab. But the reason I'm showing you these images among all is not only because they are beautiful, but because they are an example of the kind of different experiences that a PhD can expose you to. Experiences that are not necessarily teaching you about your specific field. In this case, they also did, but mostly with those trips, I did learn other abilities that I use every day, such as flexibility, the ability to arrive in a new place and quickly learn the tools that I need in order to achieve my goals. the ability to solve a problem quickly, because when you have 3 days when you cannot observe the sky and you had to write a proposal in order to do so, so you had to struggle in order to get those 3 days. And then during the night, maybe you are in a desert and a cloud comes and you realize you are not going to see the stars that you expected to see. And you have somehow to reinvent the way to use that time. There, you have to learn how to replan things quickly, explain them to everyone that is around of you. It takes a lot of problem solving to do so, and a lot of adaptability. Also, of course, I had to work with people I didn't know before, and in English, clearly. So it's an example of an experience that entangles 1,000 of learnings, of skills that you can later on spend on the job market. And PhDs in general are full of such experiences that sometimes when you are in it, you feel like they're annoying. I give you some other examples. Maybe some of you had to organize conferences or be the mentor of students, or maybe handle meetings, or do projects with companies, for example. These kind of experiences can sound annoying, but very often they teach you so much of the so-called transferable skills that you are going to be able, if you are aware that you acquired those, you're going to be able to use them to orient yourself on the job market later on. This already gives you an idea of what will be the core message of my topic, which is that a PhD is not only being the expert of your field, but is a very rich professional experience that prepares you to do a lot of different things and to apply your way of thinking, your reasoning, your mindset to a lot of different problems, no matter in what context. So in February 2013, I finally got my PhD. And of course, this is what happened. The top of the existential crisis that in my case started on the second year. In the Netherlands, they call it the second year depression. That is quite long for a 4-year PhD. So in Italy, it lasts a little bit less. But in the end, for me at least, it was clear that I was going to quit, even though it took me a very long time to be able to admit it and to make this choice. If someone of you feels something different or want to ask me something about it later on, feel free. I will not go into that now, otherwise it takes too much time. So it was clear for me that I wanted to change, but I truly had no idea where to go, what to do with my PhD in something completely not applicable. Some astrophysicists, for example, are good in programming. That is something you can very easily spend on the job market, but I don't like it. Some are, we are good with statistics, with modeling, but I choose that I didn't want to go working in banks, for example, where many find space, and that also cut me away from another big slice of the market I had in mind by the time. So I really didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was out there for me, what I wanted to do, because I knew I wanted to use my personal skills more, which were not very much used in my PhD because it was quite a lonely PhD for me. I was not sure what I was good at and what I truly liked. And mostly, I had no idea how could I be paid for the things I liked, such as writing or doing what I'm doing today, talking to people, explaining. Dissemination was a possibility for me, but I quickly realized it is a difficult market to go do. So I was quite lost. And it's not strange that I was, because truly there are a lot of issues that a PhD has to face when you are on the verge of the career transition. Some that depend on us, some that depend on the cultural context we are in, the country we are in, the culture of our country. Some are practical, some are psychological. Let me give you some example. This is true for Italy, but actually it's true for other countries as well. But let me focus on what we see here in Italy. Things that depend on us and that are cultural or psychological. Well, you are in front of a situation where you have to redefine yourself professionally, but even personally. An easy way to see it is that we rarely say that we do research. We usually say that we are researchers. And personally, I think that when you become a researcher, you are a researcher forever, because it's an approach to problems, to life, that you always keep and you always use, even though you don't do research anymore. But when you are on the verge of the transition, you don't realize it, and you think that you are quitting, that you are throwing through the trash everything that you studied for. You wonder, well, if I quit now, if I don't stay in the academia, if I don't become a professor, as I imagine too, will I be wasting these 3 or 4 years? Why did I do a PhD then? This is the kind of issue that you face. I don't know if some of you maybe already is in it right now. There is often an unawareness of the personal values. So the things that really give meaning to you, professionally speaking, you don't know what they are. Many PhDs that we interview with Find Your Doctor think they only like research. But when they are invited to express what is it exactly that they like about doing research in the academia, you discover that what really matters for them is sometimes making a difference, doing something that is extremely intellectually challenging, or doing something that is complex, or solve problems in general, or even other aspects such as dissemination. When you realize what are the values that are underneath the research experience that you really care about, you can imagine where to look for those outside the academic path as well. But it is rare that this kind of awareness is present. Definitely it wasn't for me. Same goes for the abilities. When I was on the 3rd year, I asked to a colleague of mine who was a postdoc. I told him, look, but Jacobo, he was Spanish. Were you always sure that you wanted to be a researcher in your life? And he told me, Eva, of course not. I'm not sure even now, but let's face it, we cannot do anything else. And I couldn't accept it. In fact, now I know it's definitely not true, and it's not a good reason to face a challenging path as the one that lays in front of you if you want to manage to become a professor eventually, because it's a path that takes a lot of energy, not only to be good in your research, but to sacrifice your personal life, maybe change country every 2 years for I don't know how long. It takes a lot of sacrifice. Doing it for the wrong reason is definitely not the best thing you can do. Sometimes you are even disoriented because your interests, the things that you truly like doing, that you can do effortlessly, being energized by those. And the combination of values, abilities, or skills and interests is what determines professional motivation. So the job you should look for is the one where you can combine your values, your abilities, and your interests together. This is the kind of job that you can keep doing even facing the most challenging difficulties. If one of those variables is not present, then you become demotivated very quickly, which is what happened to me. And maybe to some of you could be. Also, there are prejudices that we have on ourselves as researchers, as PhDs. I give you some examples. Many PhDs think that they should hide their title on the job market because PhD is not understood, is an experience that is not well known, and we will be considered overqualified for any kind of job, and no one will ever appreciate us. Now, this is a kind of narrative that is very common in university. It roots in some true problems, some true issues that you will see in this table, because they are cultural and related to others. You see them in the blue box on the bottom left. Prejudices on the researchers are definitely there. Italy is a country where PhD was introduced late, and there is very little awareness of what it means on the job market, even though it's increasing together with the number of PhDs in the country. There is an academia society gap that you have to face when you look for a job. So definitely is not easy, but I will show you that is also not true that we are not understood and not appreciated and we should hide our PhD. Is a prejudice, a self-limiting prejudice that depends on us. And then there are prejudices we might have on the outside, such as I will never find something challenging enough if I leave academia. Everything will be boring. I will waste my brain. I will only work for profit, and so on. These kind of ideas, of predefined ideas that are basically based on ignorance that we have about the outside world, can be extremely self-limiting. I had those, so I can tell. Also, there are issues that depend on us and are practical, like not knowing the possible destinations, not knowing our career options, or how the recruitment process works and how can we use it in our favor. And there is also usually an unawareness of market-oriented language. Let me give you only one example of this. For example, I heard from the HR of a big company an example where they were looking for a big data analyst. And at some point, she was the HR manager, so quite high in the chain of decision. And she ended up finding a CV on a desk, which was the CV of an astrophysicist, who defined herself by saying that she was used to analyze tera of data. But she did not call herself a big data analyst because she was not used to define herself this way. An astrophysicist, at least at that time, would not choose those words. So the CV was discarded by the first level of the selection in the beginning of the recruitment process, because there was not the proper keyword to match the requirements. And at the first level of selection, the person in charge to choose the candidates did not know enough about the job in order to realize that I'm used to analyze tera of data means that basically with a minimum training, you are a big data scientist. This is just an example. All these dimensions, this lack of awareness about practical and cultural elements is things that we try to teach to PhDs in our training courses that we give as Find Your Doctor, basically because it's all the things I didn't know, and I try to make you know now. Also, there is much more awareness now, and many universities offer courses in order to support you in the face of this kind of transition that is ahead. There are also practical problems that depend on others. For example, few universities are starting to train you on useful tools for the knowledge workers. A knowledge worker is a worker who is able to not only to handle knowledge, but also to be self-managed, to work in the agile way, so be self-oriented, handling your own time, is the kind of worker that is supposed to be the worker of the future. And a PhD is a very good school to train knowledge workers because you are mostly self-managed, you are used to use you have computer proficiency, you are used to international environments. These are all skills that are supposed to be the skill of the workers of the future. And we don't even know we have them very often. And sometimes we lack a little bit of tools that are useful in order to put them together and make us the perfect innovator, the perfect knowledge worker, such as knowing how to handle international intellectual property, for instance, or funding, or how to do project management. Some universities are starting to teach us that, others are still behind. Also, there is a complete lack of support from agencies, from job agencies. When I came back to Italy, I found that no one was able to help me. I wrote to all kinds of agencies. They either did not reply or told me that they did not handle profiles such as mine. And also, during the PhD, many of us don't much interact with the outside. So we stay in our bubble, and we are very uncomfortable going out of it when you have to. Also, there are, in most cases, unfitting recruitment tools, such as software that are behind the majority of job matching portals, such as Monster, but even LinkedIn, that are based on keywords that are often inconvenient for us, especially combined with our unawareness of the language, as I mentioned before. So it's tough. And it was particularly tough for me, as I said, because I came from such a not applied research environment. I had to change the working environment, as everyone who leaves academia has to do, but also the topic completely, the role, and the language. So it was not exactly a positive or relaxing situation. I also immediately did the wrong things, because what I did was, well, I flew back to Italy. I kind of slept for a couple of months, relying on the money I saved during the PhD, and then I started looking for a job. And I tried to use the web. But I don't know if you tried. When you try to use the web, you get lost, because there is 1,000 of portals and websites. The website of the agencies, the collectors, is a jungle, kind of a Jumanji, we used to say. And you really need to learn how to orient yourself in this mess. I can't teach you now because we don't have the time, but it's something you need to learn. Don't get lost in it. It makes no sense. You have to choose what to use. What I didn't do was, in the beginning, was using my network, which is one of the right things to do instead. And also the other right things to do, which I at least a little bit did, is to try stuff randomly. I mean, expose yourself to possible job experiences, even if they are not, even if you are not 100% convinced that is the dream job. Because sometimes you have ideas that are wrong. For example, I had in mind that I liked to teach. And it's true, I like to teach. I did try to go teaching at the high school. I end up in a professional high school where they didn't care about math and physics that much. And I quickly realized that even though I like talking to people, I like it when they listen to me. I don't like if I have to fight in order to be listened to. So teaching was not the road for me. And it was very good that I just randomly tried it, because someone told me that I should just subscribe to the equivalent of the CISA. It was called like that some time ago. So I should just start studying in order to become a teacher. Thank God I didn't do so, because otherwise I would have studied more and then find out that I didn't like the job. So try. Don't worry too much. Just try. And the network thing was crucial. This is an exercise that we often give to our PhDs. I show it to you. It's useful not only if you are at the end, but also if you are in the middle of a PhD, because it's nice to check if you can do it. And if you can't, maybe you can try to do something in order to improve the situation. Basically, you have to put your name in the center, and then try to put in the flower names of people who could possibly help you find the job you want. So it's a way to map your connections. And if you realize that you only put academic names in it, you might have a problem when you have to find a job outside. So it's better that you expose yourself a little bit more to conferences, projects with the outside. Try to talk more about people. Maybe you are staying too much in the lab if you find yourself in that situation. In my case, this flower was a disaster. But at least, at a certain point, I went talking to a childhood friend who was still in contact with my dad, who was working in technology transfer. He is the director of the consortium of companies, whose mission was to try to connect academia with the rest of the world. So I went there saying, look, you work with innovation and this kind of stuff. What do you think I can do with my CV in astrophysics? And he told me, I don't know. I'm struggling a lot connecting academia with society, and it's not working. We talked together, and in the end, this was the beginning of Find Your Doctor. Because basically our idea was, why don't we stop trying to put academia in contact with small companies that have very different logics, very different dimensions, very different approaches and goals and so on. But we start putting in contact companies and society in general with PhDs who have to leave academia and don't know what to do with their future, because there, I think, there is some common ground to work with. And in fact, it was true. Nowadays, Find Your Doctor is still a startup, but is working quite nicely. We have 6,000 researchers subscribed to our website. If you want to subscribe, everything is for free for you. Instead, companies pay in order to have either the consultancy of PhDs that we aggregate through the network and accompany into companies in order to solve problems that the company pose in a protected environment, because you are together with us and we ease the relation. Is a way to start experiencing a company when you are still in the research environment. But also, of course, companies pay in order to hire PhDs or to hire you as trainers for courses that are cutting edge, that require some expertise at a PhD level. So I started as an astrophysicist. I had in mind as a child that I wanted to become a scientist and be one day a professor at the university and do research in astrophysics for a living. And I failed because I did not become any of that. But I failed because I realized during the way that my dream was naive. And I end up doing something very weird that I would never have dreamed about, ever. But I kind of like it. It's meaningful for me. And I'm using my PhD every day, even though the problems I face now have more to do with people than with stars. But I see that my mindset, my approach, that I'm brave. And I was brave even when I started Find Your Doctor and I was a fresh PhD graduate. I had a courage that I would never have had as a master graduate. The PhD really gave me a lot. And the same goes for every one of us once we realize it. We become professionals that are truly, that have been exposed to a challenging school. And we are ready to expose ourselves and to be creative, to innovate, to change, to try, to experiment in a way that a master graduate is not. So it's still me, but I realized that as a PhD graduate, as a researcher, you can always see yourself in two ways. You become kind of an amphibious being, a hybrid, who is able both to understand and follow and talk to those who live in the academic bubble, but also you can quickly learn the language of the rest of the world and become able to bridge the two. This is one of the reasons why PhDs are considered an asset from the European Union in order to achieve the development goals of the Union itself, because it is believed that we are what is needed in order to bridge the gap between the academia and the rest of the world. We are the vehicle of the third mission of the university. We are the ones who can translate. We are no more trained to be academics, but we are being trained to be innovators and bring the logic of science everywhere. So what comes from my story is an example of what holds for the majority of PhDs. Only a small amount of PhD graduates nowadays get tenure. You see here a graphic from the Italian Association of Doctorate Holders. But this is also true in other countries, not only in Italy. It's just that some other countries, mostly the Great Britain or the US, have a private market that is more ready to acquire PhDs. So the transition is a bit easier, but academia is not that easy for any kind of country in the Western world, at least. So you are probably not gonna stay in the academia, but you will find a job. Because it seems from statistics that we have, there are several studies from the European Union, there are studies from the ISTAT on Italy. Even though the job transition is difficult, PhDs have the highest occupation rates on the market, no matter the discipline. So scientists, hard scientists have an advantage, but even social scientists are more employed than master graduates on average. And almost 90% of PhD graduates, 4 years from graduations, do jobs that are defined by ISTAT as highly qualified. So it's not that we are employed because we are all in the call centers. It's not like that. It seems that we do find jobs that are meaningful. Of course, it's not necessarily private research. We have to overcome the idea that you will still be an R&D in the private, just as you were a researcher in the public. This is true for a minority of PhDs, around 9%, mostly in the hard sciences. For the others, the world of services is where we find more easily a future, a perspective. It's a very messy world, but where we can create our space and value ourselves as innovators, as knowledge workers, as people who is able to build their space and explore it and make it fruitful. So as a PhD, what you become is close to this definition from the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. This is the definition they give about a researcher: a professional engaged in the conception and creation of new knowledge, and that's obvious, but also products, processes, methods, and systems who are directly involved in the management of projects. And this is what I've done, even though, again, accreting binaries did not matter anymore at all. We are believed to be employable because not only because we are the expert of our field, but because we acquire skills during a PhD that are related to communication, negotiation, management, creative thinking mostly, or the ability to adapt, to learn different things. We often change research topic or we try new things during the PhD, and we become fast learners. That's something we can value a lot on the job market. In general, it is believed by the European Union, at least, that well-trained, creative, and dynamic researchers are indispensable for building and sustain a competitive knowledge-based economy. Europe still has a long way to go before it matches the US, Japan, and China in the ratio of business to public sector researchers. These are just a bunch of other skills that you acquire when you do a PhD that are skills of a knowledge worker, skills that you can use very broadly outside the academia. I don't want to go into that because I'm short on time, but you see, there are others here: problem management, information management, project management. But the core message I wanted to give today, starting from my own experience, is that your PhD is not going to be wasted even if you stop being an academic researcher. And think about it as an onion structure, where your research topic is the center, but then you have layers and layers of stuff that you learn around it and that you can use in your future independently by it. And my suggestion is expose yourself as much as you can, which I didn't do and I regret. Because when you have the opportunity to peek outside, you can become better in imagining yourself in a different context. You can start to learn the language, and then the transition becomes a little bit less traumatic. As I told you before, the goal is to be in between those circles. And in order to be in between those circles, you need to know yourself, try yourself, and reason, acquire what is called a metacognitive stand. So you need to put yourself above what you're doing and try to see the meaning of it, the foundation of it, in order to be able to transfer them. In conclusion, yesterday, the end of a PhD was a one-way to the academic life, and you could consider yourself a failure if you were not good enough to go the next step. But nowadays, it's very different. We are meant to jump out of the academic water and learn to walk on the dry land, and then be, such as the frog, able to move from one world to the other, bridge the two, and possibly contaminate the two for the advantage of both and of society in general. With this, I thank you. I hope you find my story and my suggestions and stimuli, because my intention was to just start some sparkles in your head, of course, not to conclude anything. But I hope it was useful for you. And if you have questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eva, for sharing your personal experience also with us, and for giving also this so positive view of changing the initial way you thought about your life. So I was wondering if I may comment or ask something to you. If somehow, how to say, how can we also, as trainers, at least now from my point of view, help the students, so younger people, to be open to this, to the possibility that their PhD is not going to then continue in research. So, is there any suggestion, or do you want to say something also towards the tutors or the advisors, young advisors that are now starting to do this with the students?
You hear me now? Yes. Yes. First of all, there is a kind of passive thing that you could do, which is help the student face their supervisors when they want to do something that is connected with the outside and they encounter opposition from the supervisors, because sometimes it still happens. There is still the idea for many supervisors that PhDs are meant to be their slaves, and that they are training them in order to stay in the academia, even though the statistics are there to see for everyone. And sometimes many PhDs do suffer the fact that I would like to try something else and think about them differently, but they find this opposition. So I don't know if maybe the young tutors can support them somehow in order to face this, to challenge this opposition. Also, I think it's very good that they are helped think about the experiences they take more generally. So not only you have to do this because it helps your research this way, or do, I don't know, do the exercise in the class because you have to. It's not that you have to, well, you have to, but it's also interesting because this of this and this reason. Also, it would be very helpful if there was more awareness in the university about the real situation in terms of employability. So maybe we can stop giving the students this idea that they are going to be under a bridge, either research or either professors or under a bridge. And probably most important of all, I think the young supervisors should listen and notice when the students start to go into existential crisis, start to feel discomfort, start to lose their sense of meaning, to lose the sense of the meaning of what they are doing, and maybe explain it to them in a more general context, not only with the academic perspective. Did I answer?
Thanks. Yes. Thanks a lot. It is always very useful to hear this from people from outside, because sometimes it is true that we live in this bubble, as you explained before. And so since I'm not seeing, maybe today people are very shy, but I was also wondering if you could comment on something that happened many times to me that could be helpful to some other people. That as I was always or several times told that I had to become more aggressive to be successful in my career, either in academia or outside. So I was wondering if you, in your courses, also give suggestions on how to behave in front of other people, or you help maybe people instead to find a way to be simply themselves.
Mm-hmm. Define aggressive, just what do they mean with aggressive when they tell you so?
So first to speak with, to be much louder with my voice, and then to become like, at least in my case, it was like maybe suggesting to behave a little bit more like a man than, yeah, so that was my case, but I guess it helped. It also happens to, I mean, apart from the gender, to people who maybe don't are not so explicitly saying their opinion every time, or just don't use their loud voice every time in a discussion. So that's, I mean, in my case, maybe it was also because of my gender, but I'm sure, and I saw that also in other occasions with men. So I was wondering if you wanted
the gender issue is definitely there. I'm also not aggressive, and I heard this from many women. But since I see that you don't want to go, you don't want me to answer with this key, I'll try to take a more general key. I think in general, what we teach is not to be more aggressive, but is to be more self-aware. Because generally, it's much easier when you know exactly what you're doing, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what are your goals, and you are in peace with those, it's much easier to come out clear and convincing. We do this when we train the students, we do this with the focus on the recruitment process. But actually, it's true in general. So maybe you don't become aggressive, but you become solid, which is another way to be taken seriously and to be able to fight your fights.
Thanks. It was always, I mean, weird to me to hear that somebody wanted to tell me that I had to change somehow. So that's, so become more solid looks much clear, and yeah, and I think I really agree with that.
Thanks.
So I think I see a question. Let me read that. Okay. So okay, so this is a question. I don't read the name actually. So okay, so this is a student, a long-term student, asking about his career. So he says he stopped his career 15 years ago due to economic issues, and started another career. And while during the pandemic, he went back to study to university probably. And now he's wondering if he still be able to enter the field of his dreams, which is in research and science. So probably this is related to stop in the research or in the university time, and then restart after this very big crisis that we are experiencing. So maybe this could be helpful. I don't know if you want to comment on this.
Yeah, there is not an answer for you, unfortunately, not a certainty to give you. Of course, as we saw, the academia is kind of close, meaning there is not much space in it. So definitely it's even more challenging if you had a bent path, a twisted road, as in your case. But my suggestion would be, well, if you are sure that research intended as academic research is your dream, as I had the impression given what you wrote, correct me if I'm wrong. If you are sure academia is what you want to do, of course, try. But my suggestion would be question this. Try to figure out if it's truly your dream, or maybe there are other possible situations where you could feel you could realize yourself in the same way that are maybe a little bit less difficult to approach. I can tell you, for example, that of course age doesn't help, but it's not not the end either. I give you an example of a PhD of a researcher we employed in a small company. He was from South America, came to Italy, got a PhD at the Politecnico di Milano. Then he had familiar issues, so he had to go back to, he even became a professor in Italy. Then he had to go back to South America because of familiar issues. When he came back, there was no space anymore for him, so he was 50. But when this company saw his profile, they fell in love. And so he was hired in a small company, he became the head of the R&D, which was not there, but he built the R&D from scratch in the company. So it's not that it's not possible, but you need to choose your battle because it's a difficult one. So you have to do it only if it's truly the option of your dream. Otherwise, I would suggest to try to diversify. Think what you like, what's in your head about academic career that you think is particularly important for you, and wonder if you can find the same thing somewhere else. I hope this helped.
Thanks a lot. So I think there is another question related to university. So how do you think Italian university are from a point of view where they properly help the students to navigate the job market?
They are starting, I can tell you that because we work with many universities who are starting to offer the so-called transversal PhD courses, which are courses about things such as intellectual property, innovation management, or they contact us because they offer to the students our course about transversal competencies, skills, the job market, and the recruitment process. So I know they are trying because they are starting to include this kind of offer in their PhD programs. To be fair, some are struggling because it's not always easy to make the students I hate the fact that PhD candidates are considered students. So for me, you are not students, you are workers. But anyway, the PhD students sometimes don't realize the importance of this kind of courses. And also the quality is not always excellent because it's a start. So still, sometimes the university tries with the first contact they have and maybe it's not optimal. But I think we have to support the ones who try because eventually it will become something that is well rotated and will work fine. I think there should be more effort in the direction of proposing experiences with the outside, because while engineers, for example, always do projects that are connected to industry, but is obvious, an astrophysicist more rarely does. But for example, we do manage to collect problems from companies that can be tackled by PhDs in a very light way. Is small problems that are too little to involve the university, but are good enough to use the knowledge and the mindset and the approach of a PhD. So it's a very nice way, even if you're an astrophysicist, to try solve something concrete, be paid for it, and try to understand your value in the outside world.
Thanks, that's very inspiring, I think, for all of us. So I think there was also Marco who probably wanted to ask something. Marco, do you want to ask it yourself?
Yeah, I will try. I have two computers, so sorry if you hear some echo. Anyway, some people think that switching from academia to let's say companies in general means trading your freedom for money. What do you say to that?
I would say that it depends where you go. And it depends what your values are. For example, if money are not a value for you, but freedom is, then you should search for an environment that allows you freedom. For example, you could become a scientific consultant, freelance, maximum freedom. You work for yourself, you do whatever you want. Of course, it's challenging somehow because you are on your own, so you also will have to find your clients, to develop your specialty, to distinguish yourself from the market. But you're completely free. So we should avoid, this is a kind of prejudice, such as those I was mentioning, it is self-limiting. The job market does not mean for-profit companies. It means non-profit organizations, profit that are social companies that do something for profit that is socially useful. For example, Find Your Doctor is formally for profit because we have to, because job agencies in Italy have to be for profit. But we are ruled as a non-profit. So basically we just pay the salaries and then reinvest everything in the project. What is very useful to do and is doable nowadays that there are mostly every kind of company and organization has a website. You should check the mission and the vision of the companies and try to feel if they are moved by the monetary part or if there is a strong importance given to other kind of values. And if they match yours, maybe you might be selling part of your freedom if you become a worker, not an independent worker, but if you become an employee, of course, you're losing some of your freedom. But you could be training it not for money, but for something that is meaningful for you. That is what is important. Do something that is meaningful for you. If it's freedom, stay free. Did I answer?
Yeah, of course.
Very clear, and thanks. So very direct. Yeah. So I think, Marco, can you confirm? I think I do not see other questions in the chat.
No, I don't see any questions on Teams or YouTube. Just comments that of people.
Okay, so yeah, people, thank you for your contributions, for your answers, and for your talk. So I also thank you together with Marco and the other people of TMS for being here today and for sharing with us your personal experience and your positive view on this failure, which is not actually a failure in the end, which is a change of life and which helped you and probably many other people to find what they liked more to do in their daily life.
I call it a successful failure in general.
It is very successful, and I think you explained that really very, very well to us. And so I hope you liked to talk to us, and I really hope we can have other experiences, maybe with trainings also in our university with you and your colleagues. Because I think, and I'm also involved with other people in this, and I hope this can be done in the future. So I thank you very much and all the people who attended today. And thanks a lot, Eva, and thanks also to your collaborators. I don't know, Marco, do you want to say something for the next webinar next week?
Yes, so thanks also from me. And if you find that this talk was interesting to you, go on findyourdoc.com or .org. So you can know more about the project and maybe subscribe, become the 6,000 first researcher who is subscribed to the platform. So next week we have another perspective, which is scientific writing. So we have Dr. Briggs and Dr. Sun, who will tell us about their career in publishing. They are publishers at Wiley, so they'll tell us about that kind of career, scientific writing. So thanks again, Eva. Thanks again to all who were involved in the organization, and see you next time.
Thank you very much and have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.